Hold on now, hold up a minute. I stated during the conclusion of the Inquisition video that if it was well received, we'd make more Inquisitor content. I want to say a massive thank you to all our supporters who have subscribed, viewed, liked and commented on our videos. I'm very new to the processes and experience of making content and I'm really enjoying it. I for one would really like to start building an international lore and possibly even hobby community. If being part of that community is something you're into or you'd enjoy, let me know by subscribing to the channel and hitting the notification bell, as the more people who jump on board, the more obvious it is to me, and I'll start gearing up in that direction, guys. Anyway, thanks again, and let's get into today's video about the indomitable Inquisitor Gregor Eisenhorn. Eisenhorn may well be the most well-known character within the entire hobby. This is thanks to a number of factors. One being the interviews and attention of a certain Henry Cavill, who is no doubt responsible for drawing a high amount of attention to the hobby through mainstream media. Though to be honest, Eisenhorn is also the protagonist in what is arguably the best novel trilogy released by Black Library. Games Workshop have even stated they're in development of bringing Inquisitor Eisenhorn's exploits to life in their first ever live action series. He's also represented by models in both the tabletop games of 40k and the older, more RPG driven game of Inquisitor. So who then is Inquisitor Eisenhorn, and why do his adventures dominate such a wide range of media? The life and deeds of the man can be viewed as a lesson by many. I am sure in some parts of the galaxy, the more Puritan members of the Inquisition, especially those of the Ordo Hereticus, recite to their apprentices Eisenhorn's fall from the Emperor's grace with a sneering sense of irony. In truth, the tale of Eisenhorn and his band of followers is exciting, endearing, violent, and immensely tragic. In fact, the evil and calamity that Eisenhorn's investigations and actions prevent have undoubtedly saved the lives of millions, if not more. A feat I'm sure those same gossiping Puritans choose to overlook. In many ways, it is the choices brought about by life-threatening situations where Gregor's descent into the clutches of radicalism have led to his ostracization from his fellows within the Inquisition. Firstly, for a more comprehensive overview on what the Inquisition is and the duty of an Inquisitor and their henchmen, check out the video linked in the description, as we have explored this together in detail recently. Now though, for the aid of anybody not yet up to date on this shadowy organisation, we will say that the Inquisition is a type of secretive agency tasked by the Emperor and Malcador themselves during the Horus Heresy with policing any actual or perceived crimes that threaten the holdings of the Imperium of Man. These risks usually take the form of the heretical, the demonic, or the xenos, with the sub-organisation being responsible for addressing each of these threats. For crimes and blots of heresy, there exists the Ordo Hereticus. To address the threat of the demonic and the warp, the Ordo Malleus is present. And with perhaps the most overarching and thinly stretched assets is the Ordo Xenos, who exists to investigate and combat the threat of the alien. Now, Inquisitor Eisenhorn is, as you would expect, an Inquisitor, but as is typical regarding matters of the Inquisition, things just aren't that simple. In the most up-to-date lore, Gregor has been deemed a radical by many, and a heretic by others. Over the course of the 3 Eisenhorn novels, as well as the Ravenor books and short stories within Magos, through the brilliant writing of Dan Abnett, we are treated to the most detailed and lore-rich understanding of an Inquisitor's ethos as we have ever been in this hobby. Not only do we gain probably the most in-depth education into the life of an Inquisitor that Black Library has detailed yet, but we also come to view the galaxy's politicking and general day-to-day life on a range of different worlds and cultures. From his early days, holding the rank of interrogator under the tutelage of Inquisitor Hupshunt, like his mentor, Eisenhorn was a member of the Ordo Xenos, and through his early career personally identified as an Amalathian, as we have explored in the Inquisition video pinned in the description. The Amalathian faction are one of the more numerous of belief systems held by Inquisitors, being found quite prevalently within all 3 major Ordos. The followers of this creed prefer to allow the Emperor's divine will to slowly and meaningfully forge a path of progression for the human race, rather than favouring more radical views of rapid change, or even upheaval. Eisenhorn also has quite a strong psychic gift, that of the telepath. He is able to project his strong willpower through his voice, This ability is of benefit in many ways, from more direct applications such as willing an opposing shooter out of cover, or convince a stubborn individual to be more suggestible and open to his point of view. Typical of the regime that is the Imperium of Man, and the dark purpose and shadowy secrecy of the Inquisition, Eisenhorn was forced to make hard and what we would see as morally questionable decisions even early during his career. Through one of the short stories in Magos, we see Eisenhorn interrogating a civilian to uncover further clues to hidden Chaos agents. Due to Eisenhorn's repeated psychic interrogations, the man's mind becomes ravaged and racked with horrible images of people melting in front of him, their skin and blood sloughing off their frame. The man's hallucinations are so lifelike that he cannot continue in his work, and he becomes destitute. As an old man, he dies lonely and completely by himself after a solitary existence due to the passing attention Eisenhorn had shown him during an investigation. An instance of acceptable collateral in service to the Ordos for the greater good of the human race. During this period of life, we gain the perspective of the hard-line Puritan who prioritizes the needs of the many over the few. He does this with no remorse, as with most Inquisitors. The ends more than justify the means, and this generally comes with a necessary amount of innocent collateral. A young and exemplary interrogator, Eisenhorn was promoted to the full rank of Inquisitor at a very young age, around his mid-20s. His thoroughness and effective track record prior to this paved the way for a successful career yet to come. As we know though, there are no happy endings in this setting, and sometimes the brightest light is one of the first to be extinguished. Now let's touch base on a couple of the key members of Eisenhorn's team, first to build a picture for you of the wider retinue as we retell Eisenhorn's tale. Within the team dynamic regards to Eisenhorn and his employees and hangers-on, we see he provides an inspirational influence for his coterie of loyal henchmen, able to react quickly on the move, alter his team's plans in the face of adversity, and achieve a desired outcome not only through teamwork and sound leadership, but also by trusting his team's abilities. To aid in communication when operating, Eisenhorn has even devised a custom language called Glossia. This is only known to Eisenhorn and members of his retinue. He is a reasonable man, but ultimately still an Inquisitor, and must have the greater good in mind. He has been quoted as stating, "I'm excusing a lot because I recognize the trauma and the loss you have suffered. But my patience isn't limitless, unlike my authority." Now perhaps one of the more popular and developed characters through the plot is Elizabeth Bequin, who is a psychic blank as well as an extremely naturally talented individual. For anybody not aware, a psychic blank is a being who has no psychic link to the warp, or what we may term as a spirit, and by their nature, diffuse the warp-sourced abilities of psykers and demons in their physical presence. To average humans with no psychic ability, to be around a blank causes them to experience feelings of disgust and irritation towards that person. People often remark they are uncomfortable or something is wrong about them, and so avoid them as they are unpleasant to be around, not knowing they are a blank. As an aside, Bequin is also the main protagonist in the most recent novel series being penned by Dan Abnett. Prior to her involvement with Inquisitor Eisenhorn, she had no formal combat experience, but upon becoming caught up in the team's affairs during one of their investigations on Hubris, Elizabeth was able to adapt to fluid situations quickly, play undercover roles convincingly, and provide a fair dosing of mental fortitude and common sense to the wider team. Interestingly, between Bequin and Eisenhorn there exists a strong romantic bond. Unfortunately for both of them, they cannot pursue this affection, as the nature of Bequin's blankness has a painful effect on Eisenhorn given his psychic nature. Throughout the novel series, we see Elizabeth leading an organisation of blanks called the Distaff, which was founded by Eisenhorn. The Distaff is a way of training and organising a large quantity of psychic blanks which can be utilised by Eisenhorn on missions to address threats relating to psykers and the demonic. Another well-known and fan-favourite member of the Eisenhorn retinue is that of the bounty hunter Harlan Nail. Nail is interesting in the way that he's the primary muscle of Eisenhorn's group, as well as being quick-witted and providing moments of humour during the team's travels. He's described as a very muscled and tall man whose size belies his speed. Besides this, Nail is loyal to a fault. In the most recent lore, even after Eisenhorn's dabbling with the heretical, Nail still seeks to serve him knowing in his heart that his master's intentions are for the greater good of humanity. Kara Swole is a red-headed wonder, in that she was an acrobat and dancer performing as part of a large circus-like troupe on her homeworld of Bonaventure, before joining Eisenhorn's team. She's most proficient with blade and pistol, though very adaptable to the often confronting situations an Inquisitor's retinue can find themselves in, including hand-to-hand combat. Kara is skilled at the art of infiltration, and several times her skills at going undetected have saved the lives of her companions. A key personality and character within the Eisenhorn novels is an Arbites officer by the name of Godwin Fischig. Being of the Arbites, Godwin is extremely devout to the Imperium and the God Emperor, without any of the zealous personality traits which sometimes accompany that profession. He is an extremely effective ally in that his investigative skills are finely honed, and he is apt in both close and ranged combat. In the years to come following Godwin's more permanent transfer from the Arbites stationed on the world of Hubris into Eisenhorn's travelling retinue, he will play a major role, whether for good or bad, in the future of Gregor Eisenhorn and his retinue. A more adorable personality within the retinue was Uber Amos, who played a key role within the team. This is because Uber was a savant. A savant is a particularly sharp individual with artificial cognitive ability relating to their memory capacity and ability to quickly process new information. In Amos' case, he had sustained a virus of sorts, which made him inclined to absorb as much information as he possibly could. Eisenhorn would utilize Amos to translate script in a variety of languages to better aid his investigations. Unfortunately for poor Uber Amos, he would meet his end while serving his master admirably. Lastly, but definitely not least, Midas and Medea Betancourt are of the planet Glavia, its people renowned for their skill as expert pilots. Medea and her father Midas both served within Eisenhorn's retinue, but at separate times. Midas was Eisenhorn's pilot, closest friend, and even confidant. Midas would be killed by a nemesis of Eisenhorn's, while Medea was very young. Upon reaching adulthood, Medea would join Eisenhorn's retinue as his trusted pilot, and carve a career of her own. Now, there will be different versions of Eisenhorn that spring to people's minds, from young Puritan with a promising career in the Ordo Xenos Helicon, to living life on the run as a declared extremis diabolus by the same Inquisition he serves. Eisenhorn and his retinue have led laboured lives indeed. While still in his Puritan prime, Eisenhorn would commence an investigation that would begin to lead his life and career in a very unanticipated direction. No sane man, less a devout Inquisitor, would countenance extremist radical viewpoints, let alone in relation to the Dark Pantheon. However, the sins Eisenhorn would commit in the years to come are truly shameful in the least, and outright heretical in the extreme. Following a lead from an earlier investigation upon the planet of Hubris, wherein the blank Elizabeth Beckwin and an arbitrator known as Godwin Fischig will come to be included within his party, Eisenhorn would begin to scrutinise the seemingly innocent Glaw noble family on the planet of Gudrun. The noble Glaw family were known ancestors of a convicted heretic and chaos cult leader named Pontius Glaw, who was in turn executed for his crimes against the Imperium. Sometime prior, though, within the same millennium, the Glaw house were allowed to continue in their existence and obeisance to the Emperor after they thoroughly distanced themselves from Pontius Glaw during the investigations of his crimes. During Eisenhorn's investigation, however, into one of the Glaw primary estates, Eisenhorn would be captured and in turn tortured by one of House Glaw's retainers. The majority of nerves in his face were irreversibly damaged. Eisenhorn's instincts would prove correct though, and the Glaw family would demonstrate their heresy through their treatment of Inquisitor Eisenhorn and his retinue, as well as their possession of chaos artifacts, the most startling of which housed the consciousness of Pontius Glaw himself. The Glaw noble house were masquerading as the loyal imperial servant, but were in fact plotting to resurrect their long-dead chaos-corrupted ancestor. House Glaw, it seemed, were rotten to the core. Eisenhorn and his team would emerge victorious from this investigation, following external help from fellow Inquisitors and a host of Astra Militarum. Gregor was now in possession of not only further leads of his investigation, but also a key chaos artifact in the form of the crystal containing Pontius's life essence. As a result of the torture inflicted upon him by Pontius' lackeys, Eisenhorn for the remainder of his life would lose the ability to use much of the musculature within his face, including permanently losing the ability to smile. Through interrogation and deceit of Pontius consciousness, Eisenhorn and his team would track escaped members of House Glaw to a known Xenos system, having entrusted the Pontius crystal with one of Eisenhorn's old friends, a Magos of the Mechanicus, Magos Buer. Among the enemy party present were not only mortal retainers of the erstwhile noble house, but also a Chaos Marine of the Emperor's children, and corrupted Inquisitor named Oberon Glaw. The planet Eisenhorn tracked them down to was coded KCX-1288 and was inhabited by a chaos-contaminated race known as the Saruthi. The landscape of this world had been tailored to something more suitable to human residents, existing within a four-dimensional landscape that the Saruthi could ensure was comfortable for their guests, House Glaw. These Xenos are extremely elusive, and there doesn't exist much detail of them, although what is known for certain is they're completely tainted by the Dark Pantheon, wherein even the natural or rather unnatural rules of physics on the worlds they inhabit are repulsive and bear little resemblance to the natural plane, such as in the Milky Way galaxy. This alien species, prior to their corruption, is thought to have come into contact with humans some 10,000 years prior, during the Age of Strife, being exposed to the temptations of the warp through an ancient text known as the Necrotuk. In fact, this ancient book was the motivation for House Glaw's travel, as they sought to bargain with the Xenos for a copy of the heretical text, intent on trading ancient Saruthi artifacts for the Terran copy of the book. Exactly what secrets lay within the book was not known at the time, but what was is the ancient lore and power contained within it far outstripped the Inquisition's current understanding, and for the likes of these foul beings to be seeking it, the arcane lore inside must be dark and powerful indeed. Fortunately, in a combined effort by Eisenhorn and his retinue, as well as loyal Astromilitaran troops, those loyal to House Glaw were defeated and the Terran Necrotuk destroyed by Eisenhorn's own hands. Unfortunately, the Saruthi had created a Necrotuk of their own, which was recorded in their language. This copy still existed and posed a very real threat to the realm of man. We'll pause here for a short moment, just to reflect on the nature of the Saruthi. In the novel Xenos, the xenologist in service to the Glaw family retells the story of the Saruthi. He states they were not always a tainted race, but that it was the artifact known as the Necrotuk which influenced them down this dark path. Apparently, the senses of the Saruthi, possibly more so their broad sense of taste, is able to extract far more information and meaning from the damned tome than mere words can by a human being. In this way, the influence of chaos quickly passed through the greatly developed and heightened senses of this Xenos race. This resulted in a great civil war, though whether this was a war between different factions of the Pantheons, or whether it was a war between pure and untainted Saruthi against their dark kin, isn't stated. Either way, the result of this great war saw the race almost exterminated, and their empire of over 40 star systems reduced to a handful of planets. It is interesting when we as the reader and fanbase learn of Xenos races who were so affected by the dark powers of the war, as we can make comparisons to the human equivalents such as the Traitor Legions and Traitor Guard. Another Xenos race we learn of in much earlier 30k lore is the reptilian-like Lair, when Fulgrim's fleet happens upon their empire, a reptilian Xenos species wholly given over to the Dark Prince Slaanesh. You can learn more about Fulgrim and his fall from grace in my video regarding the turning of each chaos-tainted Primarch. Enough reflection though, and let's get back to the story of Eisenhorn. Following this conflict with Glaw's forces on KCX-1288, Eisenhorn would find himself within the Inquisition's fleet, among a gathering of Inquisitors and other officials of the Imperium, including the Lord High Inquisitor Rorken and a brother captain of the Deathwatch Space Marines. Radical Inquisitors present would call for censure against Eisenhorn. They claimed his disposal of the Necrotuk was naive, if not downright heretical. They claimed the corrupted text could teach the Inquisition much of how to counter the ancient enemy, and that Eisenhorn should be given the strictest censure as a result. Luckily for Eisenhorn, his allies present, as well as the High Lord Inquisitor and Captain, agreed with Eisenhorn's course of action, believing that anybody exposed to the book's knowledge would likely in turn become corrupt. This in itself clearly displays the split of ideologies that exist within the Inquisition, and one does wonder how differently a gathering of more radical agents would have treated Eisenhorn, with the possibility he may have been imprisoned to stand trial, if not executed, for his perceived crimes. Following the Imperial victory over House Glaw and their associates, in pursuit of escaped Glaw operatives, Imperial forces including the 50th Gudrunite Rifles, naval security teams, inquisitorial stormtroopers, and a kill team of Space Marines belonging to the Death Watch would gather for an attack on the Saruthi homeworld of 56 Izar, intent on destroying the Saruthi Necrotook and quelling the threat these chaos-tainted Xenos posed. The fleet belonging to House Glaw had arrived 2 days earlier, and, determined to take possession of the last existing copy of the Necrotook, had begun a planetary assault on the Saruthi homeworld. While armed forces including Eisenhorn's team and the Death Watch made planetfall, the Imperial Navy engaged House Glaw's formidable armada of 13 ships. Whilst on the surface of 56 Izar, Eisenhorn would be confronted by the powerful demon host Cherubael. The Necrotook clutched in his clawed grip. Up to this time, Cherubael had been monitoring Eisenhorn's movements and haunting his dreams. The damned being would demand Eisenhorn hand over the primer, a piece of equipment which enabled a human to read the Saruthi Necrotook. Otherwise, he stated, he'd be forced to break every bone in Eisenhorn's body and chain him up to await the ensuing exterminatus the Inquisition fleet would soon release. When Gregor demanded to know who had made the demon host, Cherubael replied it was the Holy Inquisition itself responsible for his binding. Eisenhorn stomped on the polyhedron form of the Necrotook primer, ensuring the Saruthi Necrotook could not be translated. Cherubael would spitefully state the structure they were standing within would be eliminated in 4 minutes. He threw Eisenhorn the Necrotook and bid he enjoy his last few minutes of victory before his impending doom. Eisenhorn's crew flying his gun cutter vessel would be moments in time to deliver Eisenhorn and the Death Watch from their fiery end. After these events, 98 years later, having experienced tragedies such as the murder of his friend and companion Midas Betancourt, and even experiencing a maiming in the process, his left hand being removed by an ex-Astra Militarum sharpshooter, Eisenhorn and his retinue, including his then interrogator Gideon Ravener, who by the way has his own 3-part novel series, would take part in a monumental parade on Thracian Prime, dedicated to the victories of the Ophidian Crusade. During this parade, due to the machinations of a corrupt Inquisitor named Quixos, Chaos-influenced Imperial fighter pilots, rather than performing as part of the parade, would instead perform strafing and bombing runs on the citizenry and forces below, killing and maiming tens of thousands. The compact bodies were so mangled that both building and people were covered in cooked blood, and the air itself was a red haze. A conglomeration of assorted forces who took part in the Ophidian Crusade, from honoured Aurora Space Marines to veteran guardsmen who'd sought to share this special day with the welcoming citizenry, were all mercilessly gunned down. Between the nimble fighter jets and the ground-to-air defences of Thracia, including the military assets of Titans and tanks who were currently taking part in the victory parade, this scene of celebration quickly became a battlefield of extreme close nature. The citizenry left to flee, while the Imperial forces present did battle with that of the heretic and the traitor. Let slip during the carnage, heretic prisoners who were being paraded through the streets, including approximately 27 Alpha Plus Psykers, took up arms against their erstwhile captives. Now the murder would take place in earnest. Alpha Plus Psykers are the most powerful grade of psychic potential in existence. In fact, the term Alpha Plus really just is a class for being so powerful as to be rated above any true measurable grade. Waves of pure chaos in the form of blue flame would wash over all within proximity of the Psykers from which it was born. All present, whether military personnel or innocent onlooker, were melted to the bone, their ashes adrift in the unnatural current around them. Although Eisenhorn was rescued mysteriously by the power of Cherubael, Interrogator Ravener was caught in this unnatural flame and would forevermore exist on the brink of death. Confined to a mobile life support device known as a force chair, Ravener would go on to lead a very successful career as an Inquisitor and acclaimed author. A notable quotation from his most acclaimed work, The Spheres of Longing: "Chaos claims the unwary or the incomplete. A true man may flinch away its embrace, if he is stalwart and he girds his soul with the armour of contempt. Following the tragedy on Thracia, travelling to the imperial fortress world of Cadia, Eisenhorn's investigations would uncover that a senior Inquisitor had used their rank and influence to recover access codes of locally assigned inquisitorial agents on the world. He would discover that an Inquisitor named Quixos was utilising cultist personnel to gather knowledge of the ancient pylons on the surface of Cadia. Thought dead, but not officially declared as such, Quixos had not been seen in over 100 years. So famed and effective in his art was Quixos that his early transcripts were required reading for all upcoming agents, including a young Eisenhorn. Figuring Quixos could very well be alive at the ripe old age of 342. Very reasonable, given the power of rejuvenate treatments, augmetics, and even dark sorcery. Inquisitor Eisenhorn would consider it entirely possible that Quixos had strayed far too close to the wretched powers he investigated, and could very well have joined the ranks of men through history, such as Gorge Van Dyer and Horace Lupercal. Great men turned corrupt, and the antithesis of all the Imperium stands for. The team would sense another false use of passcode, and travel to confront the potential Quixos. What they would find was an extremely powerful demon host called Profunti. Though the demon host's efforts to destroy the Inquisitor and their Cadian allies would not eventuate, it was not through foiled plans on the corrupted one's side, but rather that Profunti was quite entertained by Eisenhorn and his team, knowing how much Cherubael liked to play with them. The demon host knew what was about to occur, and so made his escape. Upon Profunti's disappearance, tens of Cadian APCs crest the ridge above the team, with a hardline Puritan Ordo Malleus Inquisitor named Ozma announcing from the lead APC, "Inquisitor Eisenhorn, you'll be arrested for crimes against the Imperium, for the atrocity at Thracian, and for consorting with demon hosts." Eisenhorn would be arrested and condemned to death. After enduring months of confinement and daily interrogation, Eisenhorn's friend and ally, the arbitrator Godwin Fischig, would infiltrate the fortress he was being imprisoned within. Using his mounts and knowledge of Imperial law, as well as authority as an enforcer of the Imperium's will himself, Godwin was able to bluff his way to an Eisenhorn, breaking the Inquisitor free. At this point in time, Eisenhorn and his team would journey to see their old companion Magos Bua and the heretic consciousness of Pontius Glaw. Eisenhorn would speak with Glaw, asking him for his help in how to bring Quixos to justice, though Glaw refused, stating he would want something in return. When Eisenhorn stated he believed Glaw's price would be the witnessing of Eisenhorn crossing the line of Imperial servant to radical, if not heretic, like Quixos or Pontius had, Pontius chuckled, stating that was not what he wanted, and that he was already enjoying that particular spectacle. Eisenhorn would propose he have Magos Bua construct Pontius Glaw a rudimentary mechanical body, such as that of a servitor, one which came equipped with the ability to experience such senses as touch, taste, and smell. Pontius Glaw was overwhelmed, and immediately told Eisenhorn to ask him the question, to which Eisenhorn stated they would discuss the matter of demon hosts. New knowledge in hand, Eisenhorn would set about a plan to take down the corrupt Quixos and his powerful demon host bodyguards. He would request his friend Bua construct and alter current equipment of Eisenhorn's to better combat the demon host they all knew must be taken down to stand a chance at eliminating Quixos. A force staff with titanium core and adamantium sleeve, virtually perfect in its construction. Eisenhorn could use this to channel and amplify his already formidable will. His blade, Barbaricata, already a sword with no equal, would be altered with pentagrammic wards, these wards having proven effective previously, the perfect weapon to eliminate a powerful creature of chaos. With these weapons and stern allies, Eisenhorn knew he could count on. They would do battle with Quixos and overcome the foul demon hosts. He would covertly reach out to 20 of his inquisitorial allies to come to his aid. Given his status of traitor, only 4 would answer the call and turn up to aid their friend and compatriot. With his friends in tow, several naval assets these allies secured, and 500 Astra Militarum of the 51st Thracian keen for vengeance, the Imperium's forces assembled, ready to storm Quixos' mountain hideaway. Following a 6-minute-long orbital bombardment upon the mountain by no less than 2 Imperial battlefleet vessels, and 30,000 kilos of payload dumped by 30 Marauder bombers, causing several false dawns to the onlooking armed forces, the loyal Imperials began to engage Quixos' ground troops. Contrary to what they believed would be a battered and subdued opposition, the forces the Loyalists faced were zealous and aggressive in their defence of the mountain. At an estimated enemy count of 800 personnel, the reserve Thracian force of guardsmen and women were released to back up their embattled colleagues. Upon deploying to the conflict on the ground, Eisenhorn is accompanied by his inquisitorial colleagues and henchmen, as well as several Cadian ex-Cassican specialists. Almost as soon as they land, they'd be confronted by the sight of Profanti battling Inquisitor Voke. They were already surrounded by a few dozen dead Loyalist troops. While Voke bravely held the powerful demon at bay, the newly arrived allies would rush forward to aid their friend in combating the demon and cultists permeating the fortress. As las pistols discharged and chain weapons bit deep, the 2 skirmish lines met. At this point, Cherubael would intervene, not allowing Eisenhorn to reinforce Voke with his newly crafted force weapons. Speaking of their intertwining destinies, Cherubael informed Eisenhorn of his protection and manipulation of the Inquisitor over the years. Cherubael admitted the reason for his plotting and underhanded scheming was due to his reasoning that Eisenhorn presented the greatest chance of Cherubael achieving freedom from his current restraints of imprisonment within the host body that Quixos had forced upon him. Little known to many, Cherubael was once a mighty demon prince on the savage world of Clanar II, worshipped by the primitive populace as a god. This was until his binding by Inquisitor Quixos. From his learnings with Pontius Glaw earlier, Eisenhorn was aware the greatest weakness of a bound demon was the willpower of the person doing the binding. The rune staff of Magos Buer. The rune staff Magos Buer had crafted for him was inscribed with runes which magnified Eisenhorn's already formidable will. Eisenhorn wielded this staff in battle with Cherubael as the foul thing charged. A stream of light collided with Cherubael square in the chest. As their wills and minds were bound together, Eisenhorn witnessed the binding and rituals that Cherubael. He also experienced Inquisitor Quixos' use of the Malus Codicium to do so. Slowly, it dawned upon him that he had gifted Cherubael exactly what he'd sought this entire time: freedom from his binding. The threat of Cherubael extinguished for the time being, Eisenhorn made his way back to the location where Voke and his other allies were battling with Profanti and their cultists. Voke, so strong of will and determination, lay dead in the rubble, and Profanti was readying the killing blow to the remaining Inquisitors, both on their knees in extreme agony. Sighting Eisenhorn and realizing the threat he posed, the demon host charged him, determined to end the upstart mortal there and then. Unfortunately for the brash warp creature, Gregor would raise his force staff, impaling the monstrosity and obliterating it outright. Eisenhorn would unite with some of the Imperial forces and continue further down the depths of the fortress within the mountain. Some distance down, they would discover hundreds of gibbet cages filled with the corpses of psykers that Quixos had been collecting up to this point. As the Imperial forces, composed of Inquisitors and hardy Cassican, advanced through the massive chamber, the first they knew of Quixos was 4 of their number split either laterally or down their spine, tearing their bodies. Quixos was devilishly, unnaturally fast, and he possessed a demon blade of great power, having bound the demon prince Kanagar, the deathly, within it. As the blur of Quixos weaved between the party, his dark demon blade reflected the few shots the team managed to snap in his direction. The corrupt Inquisitor turned to Eisenhorn, intent to inflict the same fate upon him. As their blades clanged together, Eisenhorn's blessed force blade matched against Quixos' damnable sword. Eisenhorn was able to take in the true corrupt visage of Quixos before him. The erstwhile Inquisitor's armour was in a state of disrepair and foul to look upon. Quixos' inquisitorial rosette was even displayed on his right pauldron, seemingly out of place surrounded by such disgraceful warp runes and corruption. The heretical agent was no longer a reflection of the Inquisition's righteousness. The chaotic corruption had begun to physically manifest throughout his body. His skin had taken on a grey, noxious composition. Horns had begun to sprout from his brow, and his eyes had taken on a blood-red coloration. The two Inquisitors, one accused by his fellows of warpcraft most foul, and one actively practicing and utilising the raw power of it, tested each other's mettle, 20 strikes between them, moving quickly as it took to take a breath. Eisenhorn's blades pentagrammic runes discharging as the two blades undertook their own battle. As the two agents fought, Quixos would accuse Eisenhorn of heresy. How dare he and his allies seek to stop Quixos' work to foil the powers of chaos? Bewildered and curious, Eisenhorn pressed the heretic for more information. Quixos would explain the pylons which dotted the surface of Cadia were used to keep the Eye of Terror above at bay. If Quixos could tap into their power and use the Alpha Plus Psychers to greatly amplify the pylon's effect, he could collapse the Eye in on itself. Though unsure whether this extreme and outrageous plan would have the effect Quixos desired, Eisenhorn was disgusted the corrupt Inquisitor would attempt this, given the side effects which could emerge as a result. Likely Cadia's continents, or even the planet itself, could be destroyed by the power unleashed, though he reckoned Quixos didn't much care for the collateral damage to the innocent populace of Cadia, given the damage he caused on Thracia just to capture a handful of Psychers. The two continued the battle, each blocking the other's attempts to cut their life short. Finally, Eisenhorn spotted a gap in Quixos' downward swing and lunged forward towards his breast. Quixos was too quick, and his demon blade riposted, breaking Eisenhorn's ancient and empowered blade in two. As if fated, the broken haft in Eisenhorn's hand, instantly understanding the opportunity presented, Gregor continued to plunge on towards Quixos with the broken blade. With all his might he pressed the blade towards Quixos' torso, through corrupt armour, augmetics and flesh, using as much strength as it took to pierce the wretched armour to pull it out again, Quixos' flesh sucking back with the pressure as the blade was removed. The damnable heretic fell back instantly onto the floor, and within scant seconds, no final words, turned to dust. The only evidence of his presence, his warp-wretched armour and shorted augmetics. With Quixos slain, the battle above ground and through the mountain was ultimately won. The Inquisition's black ships, vast vessels which ply the known galaxy collecting individuals of psychic potential or might, would turn up in force to the planet, ready to take on fresh human cargo. The screaming chambers of these dark vessels would be filled anew with the heretic wretches who threw their lot in with Quixos. Their fate ultimately unknown, whether it be food for the Carrion Emperor on his golden throne, or execution, their continued existence deemed too dangerous to allow them to live. Other enemy personnel, whether they be military or psyker, too powerful to risk transportation, were executed on the surface for their crimes against the Imperium of Man. Though the Imperial forces would search this fortress and Quixos' fastness on the planet of Manganar, the Malus Codicium, Quixos' tome of nearly limitless chaos knowledge, was never located by the Inquisition or Astra Militarum forces. Ozma's allegations against Eisenhorn were dropped, given the evidence and eyewitness accounts of reliable and prolific allies who had joined their fates with Eisenhorn's for the purge of Quixos. Ozma's career was not negatively affected in any way. In fact, in 20 years' time, Ozma would be elected Grand Master of the Ordos Helican after the sudden and unexpected demise of his predecessor. In secrecy, away from any of his fellows, or even his henchmen's attention, Eisenhorn would find suitable vengeance against Cherubael for his decades of manipulation over Eisenhorn's life. In the darkness of a secure basement underneath his personal dwelling on Gudrun, Eisenhorn would use dark law to summon, bind, and trap the recently freed Demon Prince. As a reprisal for deeming to use one of the Emperor's servants to benefit a pawn of the Dark Pantheon, the demon would suffer this ignominy. Eisenhorn would state these facts to the bitter demon as it lashed against its chains, hatred a palpable wave pouring from the beast. Content Cherubael was secured, Inquisitor Gregor Eisenhorn turned away from the creature, locking it within various force shields and encoded doors, as he continued upstairs to a hosted dinner with his friends and compatriots. First, though, he would visit his study, place back the ceremonial items, as well as his force staff. Most important and secretive of all, in a hidden alcove, Eisenhorn would seal away the Malus Codicium, Quixos' damnable tome of dark power, and the source of the knowledge Eisenhorn had used to bound Cherubael. In retrospect, unintentionally, his heart filled with hate and vengeance, Eisenhorn had taken his first steps on the long and treacherous road to damnation. In the years following the persecution of Quixos, Eisenhorn would respectfully turn down the position of heir apparent to Rorken, Inquisitor Lord of the Ordo Xenos Helican. He would not pursue higher office within the Ordo Xenos, even though he clearly had the natural talent to do so. Eisenhorn's heart and passion were more suited to field work, stamping out the threat of the alien, the mutant, and the heretic personally. He abhorred being locked in a courthouse, administering sentences to far pettier matters. 45 years following his original summoning of Cherubael, Eisenhorn and his team of associates had the opportunity to avenge the murder of Midas, which had taken place not long after the affair with the Necrotok. Upon the world of Dura, in the Ophidian subsector, the forces of chaos having been defeated during the Ophidian Crusade, had stored 3 powerful corrupted titans before making their escape. It seemed Fade Thuring, a heretic to the core, intended to reactivate these machines to aid him in his diabolical machinations. Upon their landing on the island of Mikwol on the world of Dura, the team would discover Thade had activated the corrupt titan, Cruor Volt. Weighing 2,500 tons and standing at 60 meters in height, this abomination was armed with a massive Gatling blaster as its right fist, and a plasma cannon as the left. Though if that wasn't enough, it also sported shoulder-mounted turbo laser batteries. Cruor Volt is a warlord-class titan, whose superiority on the battlefields of the 41st millennium is undisputed. A titan bears the most powerful and destructive weapons of any land-based construction, second only to the destructive power of spacefaring vessels. They are constructed of such intimidating proportion as to dominate a battlefield as well as their enemy's mind, pressing down on their will to fight and breaking their morale. Constructed with a mind impulse link so as to possess their own personality and semi-consciousness, Titans truly do earn the title God Machines. Cruor Volt, a titan of the Dark Gods, was covered in razor wire and spiked studs. Its panels rusted, though no weaker in integrity for it. Chains which displayed thousands of human skulls adorned its black armor plate. Runes of defilement and dark power etched upon it. A leering chrome skull was mounted atop its torso, keen to spot its rodent-like enemy. This beast was a stark contrast to the glorious visage of an Imperial Titan. Eisenhorn and his team of associates were facing nothing less than certain death as the Titan stomped through an allotment of warehouses and barracks, hunting the mice-like beings. Great in their booming sonic force and ancient in their artifice, war horns of malefic design called out across the breadth of the island, announcing its strength and presence, an open challenge daring any to accept. A deep primal fear was triggered by all of loyal heart, freezing them to the spot. They would forcefully will themselves to move, and tried their best to evade the gaze of the dark beast. As Eisenhorn's team navigated the buildings around, the earth under their feet would shake with the terrible footsteps of the Titan. Their tiny size compared to the god beast perhaps their only advantage, but a dwaning one nonetheless, as the Titan would level every structure on the island to reveal its prey if need be. Ancient hunger which could only be satiated by murder burned deep within the automaton. Using military-grade sensors, the buildings would not provide absolute cover, as the Titan was built for war zones on planets of unimaginable horror. An island of buildings would not be enough to shield the small Imperial force indefinitely. They scrambled through the ruins, desperately searching for a way to combat the monster. Elizabeth Beckwin was badly hurt in the process, a psionic backlash hurling her so forcefully into a wall that the breaking of several bones was easily audible and would force her into a coma. A naive and fresh-faced Inquisitor named Vervuk would order Midas Beckenhall's daughter Medea to take Eisenhorn's personal ship and attempt to combat the Titan. Despite Eisenhorn's protests over the comm, Medea did her best to take down the Titan, though with one shot from Cherubael's cannon merely clipping the cutter, the aircraft went down, hard into the shallow line of the island's shore, half on its side and flaming. As Cherubael used its plasma cannon to annihilate anybody visible to the cruel beast, Inquisitor Gregor Eisenhorn would see no other way to save himself and his allies than to conjure the bound demon beneath his personal holdings on Gudrun. He would summon the aid of Cherubael. Taking up his force staff still slick with the blood of his recently murdered friends, and using their deaths as an initial sacrifice, Eisenhorn began the necessary conjuring. Trying to concentrate while the stones and dismantled ruins of buildings shook around him, Cherubael stomped towards Eisenhorn, savouring the moment before the kill. Reciting the Malus Codicium, the ancient chaos-corrupted tome he'd stolen from Quixos' Lair decades earlier, Eisenhorn had been studying the damn book to better understand how he could use its dark energy to combat the great enemy. This Puritan's fall to radicalism, all but complete. Eisenhorn finished the incantation as Cherubael appeared out from the head of the force staff, summoned from Gudrun. "Kill it," Eisenhorn ordered. The bright white form of Cherubael travelled so quickly through the torso of Cherubael that it seized up mid-step, its skull visage cracking, and its midriff and arms exploding almost instantly. The ancient enemy of mankind was dead in its tracks, its newly assigned crew having met grisly ends at Cherubael's hands. Exerting so much will, reaching across space to set free the demon Cherubael, Eisenhorn could not maintain his hold on the demon's will. In this moment, the thing could have fled, escaping the possibility of re-imprisonment, but it chose vengeance instead, as it stayed on the island, intent to stalk and slay Eisenhorn. As Eisenhorn sought ways to combat Cherubael, he came across the prone and wounded form of Inquisitor Vervuk, the young naive Inquisitor who looked up to Eisenhorn as a mentor. He had escaped the downed craft. Grasping the moment, Eisenhorn began to paint dark sigils on Vervuk using the man's own blood, while the Inquisitor asked him what he was doing. Filled with self-loathing, Eisenhorn asked for the man's forgiveness before finalizing the incantation and binding Cherubael to the still-living Inquisitor. No longer able to hide the demon's existence from his friends and allies, Eisenhorn used his belt as a leash, tethering the floating demon host in its placid, bound state. This sin that Eisenhorn had committed, and the suspicion now harboured by his companions, was only the start of this brave Inquisitor's tragic fall from grace. Following these events, Eisenhorn, believing himself safe, would experience a home invasion performed by experienced mercenaries. They would kill their way through Eisenhorn's premises on Gudrun, searching for his team, as well as the Malus Codicium. Unbeknownst to Eisenhorn, this was merely part of a larger plot to root out Eisenhorn's allies, with his distaff headquarters also being hit, and most of the psychic blanks murdered, some managing an escape. Scarcely able to survive with his life and that of his key retainers, Eisenhorn set about figuring out what had just occurred. Eventually, with the help of his allies, he learnt that Glaw had escaped the clutches of Magos Buer and was pulling the strings of his life, much as the hated Cherubael had those decades earlier. Clearly, Magos Buer was dead, or worse, if Glaw was able to escape. When relinking with Godwin Fischig, The arbitrator would condemn Eisenhorn for keeping Glaw imprisoned rather than turning him over to the Inquisition. Godwin would claim that besides this sin, Eisenhorn also knew how to summon demon hosts. What other secrets or dealings was Eisenhorn keeping from his friends? In return, Eisenhorn defended his actions, noting that Godwin did not state his objections at the time, and that he only did what he thought was best. He claimed Godwin was far too hardline Puritan for his own good. Eisenhorn would give Godwin 2 days to consider whether he would join him and his team to foil Pontius Glaw's plans. The following day, Godwin would leave unannounced. Following this troubling news, the ship, the SN, on which Eisenhorn and his crew were travelling, would receive an encrypted message from Eisenhorn's old friend and pupil, Gideon Ravener. The communication gave Eisenhorn instructions to travel to Promedy in the Antimar subsector, which took another 10 weeks of void travel. Gideon would explain to Eisenhorn that through Eldar associates of his, they had read space-time and unravelled possible futures with great accuracy. They had foreseen Pontius Glaw astride in a new metal body upon a dead world. Past this, the Farseer could see no future for the Milky Way galaxy. Before Eisenhorn and his crew could leave to attempt to stop Pontius Glaw from achieving whatever hellish plan he had for the known galaxy, puritanical and erstwhile friend of Eisenhorn's, Godwin Fischig, would lead Gregor's hated adversaries, Inquisitors Ozma and Haldane, into the SN. This time Ozma and Haldane would broker no tricks and were aggressive in their approach. The two Puritan Inquisitors, while having elite inquisitorial stormtroopers hunt the ship and stalk the crew, would use Fischig's accusations to accuse Eisenhorn of consorting with demons, conjuring demon hosts, hiding prescribed texts, that of the Malus Codicium, and shielding a heretic from the wrath of the Inquisition in the form of Pontius' imprisonment by Buer. Godwin Fischig would appear from the upper deck, interjecting during the Puritans' interrogation of Eisenhorn. He would object to the questioning, as it became apparent that Ozma and Haldane merely wanted to acquire Cherubael and the Malus Codicium for their own use. Far from the Puritan action Fischig thought they would take, were he to report Eisenhorn's actions to the Inquisition. Before the corrupt Puritans could persist in their final search or psychic interrogation of Eisenhorn, Cherubael would fall upon Ozma, Haldane, and their retainers. Ozma would take the opportunity to attempt to kill Eisenhorn using his massive powered demon hammer. However, the ship's captain Maxilla was able to evaporate Ozma's head from behind using his digital ring weapon before Ozma could deliver the coup de grace to Gregor. While studying some texts to aid in Eisenhorn's investigation, Uber Amos had learnt how to summon Cherubael into one of the vessel's astropaths in a last-ditch effort to save his friends from the fiery retribution of Ozma. While Eisenhorn and his various crews sought to escape the carnage Cherubael was causing about the SN, Godwin would chase him down, pleading for Eisenhorn to denounce the heretical ways he had employed over the last few years in an attempt to save his friend's soul, even shooting out Eisenhorn's left knee in the process to stop his escape. When finally he realised, Eisenhorn would not repent, as he believed he didn't need to, whether this was true or not. Godwin Fischig would pull the trigger of his bolt pistol that was pointed at Eisenhorn's skull. Fortunately for Eisenhorn, Medea shot Godwin with her needler pistol just as he compressed the trigger, and the shell hit a wall a distance to Eisenhorn's side. Godwin Fischig was dead. Before the small team could make their escape, Cherubael located them. He charged down the hallway with every intention to tear them all apart. Amos, having studied the Malus Codicium and retaining all the knowledge within thanks to his augmetic memory, knew what to do and disincorporated Cherubael using Eisenhorn's forestaff, though it took the last of his life's effort to do so. In a heinous mirror of the ritual Eisenhorn reluctantly administered upon poor Inquisitor Vervuk back on Jura, the team made ready Godwin Fischig's lifeless corpse for possession. So it was Eisenhorn and his retainers made their escape, a bound Cherubael in tow. Shaken but resolute, Eisenhorn and his team made their way to Ravener and his retinue to seek help in bringing low Pontius Glaw. determined to make him pay for the losses they had suffered to date. On the damnable world of Ghoul, the Imperial host of 3 vessels arrived. Spotted along the planet's seemingly dead surface were immense mountain-sized maze constructions that they would need to navigate. Following his knee injury by Godwin Fischig, a friend and surgeon within Eisenhorn's team would install a rudimentary metal frame to allow him to walk so as to finish the time-sensitive investigation. For this frame to work properly would require Eisenhorn's head to be shaved and neural and synaptic cables urgently worked into the metal leg frame, leaving the back of his head bloody and raw. The black cables which led from the back of his head down his spine were flesh stapled into his back, a prime discomfort Eisenhorn would learn to live with. Eisenhorn's troop would join forces with that of Ravenor's following the most recent harrowing events aboard the SN, though Ravenor was also accompanied by the Eldar Farseer, which had aided him in the foresight regarding Pontius' plans. A complement of dire Avengers served as a bodyguard to the Farseer. As they made progress from the landing site towards the point Glaw would be located, no doubt in force, they would come under fire by mercenaries, losing some of their number. The group would work their way on hoist ledges up sheer mountain faces hundreds of miles in height to reach Glaw. As they worked their way through dark corridors through a newly discovered tomb complex, Cherubael clearing enemy threats ahead of the main group, Glaw was in sight. He was attempting to access the tomb of a long-dead demon prince. At a glimpse below, within an immense chasm, a construct the size of a hive city was barely visible in the cavernous depths. It appeared to be fashioned from bone, stone, and metal, all simultaneously, and made Eisenhorn sick to the stomach to look upon. This dark prize is what Pontius Glaw sought, the chariot of a demon prince which had carried its master and his armies through countless battles between the warp and real space. Eisenhorn's band became embroiled in a firefight against Glaw's mercenary army and henchmen. Eisenhorn and Cherubael went straight for the head of the beast, attempting to combat the menace Pontius presented and stop his personal army in their tracks. Glaw taunted Eisenhorn regarding Magos Buer fashioning his new body, and the Magos murder at Glaw's hands. By the appearance of Glaw's metallic body, it appeared Pontius Glaw had corrupted poor Magos Buer long before his murder, as the body he'd fashioned originated from no sound mind. Pontius' new form sported a golden mask, a threatening-looking blade coat, powerful-looking alloy hands, and hooked blades which emerged from slots in his fingertips, which he'd used to tear at the flesh of the formidable Cherubael. As the three met, Pontius would strike Cherubael with a mental spear, picking him from the air and causing him to tumble unceremoniously to the ground. As Cherubael and Eisenhorn combated Glaw's new and formidable form, to even the numbers, Pontius Glaw would bring to bear a demon host of his own, one not limited in its power as Cherubael was due to the nature of Eisenhorn's binding. Alone, Eisenhorn's ability to combat Glaw was dwindling in effectiveness as the links and braces between his skull, spine, and leg began to displace and pop out, rupturing the flesh around the sockets and seizing up movement in his legs, making it difficult to parry, let alone press an attack with his force blade. As Glaw pushed Eisenhorn back, forcing him upon his knees, Glaw would take delight in the fact, laughing at the prospect of finishing him there and then. In this moment, no other options available, Gregor realized the Malus Codicium would have allowed Pontius to be away with the demon vessel already, had he managed to obtain it raiding his premises on Gudrun. Eisenhorn, taunting Pontius Glaw, removed the book from his coat, the last thing Glaw expected, and began to rip the pages out of the ancient text, setting fire to the pages in his hands by projecting his willpower. The unnaturally tall and slim metal form of Glaw began to jump into the air, snatching what scraps of the priceless pages he could, panicking in the process. As Glaw went about his frantic, childlike attempts to jump for the pages drifting above him, Eisenhorn was on him with his force blade. With the first blow he almost severed Pontius' head completely, The next thrust was into his upper body, slashing into his metal frame and driving the monstrosity back towards the edge of the great gulf and tomb below. A third thrust tore his mask free of his artificial head, displaying plainly the crystal containing his consciousness and the various circuitry linking his will to the extremities of the artificial frame. Seizing the moment, Eisenhorn declared Pontius Extremis Diabolus before striking his psychic blade through the head and crystal, staggering the frame and sending it over the edge, down the great darkness beyond, shattering Pontius' being. Following this duel, Eisenhorn would collapse in a pool of his own blood, the fight having drained most of his vitality. Cherubael would appear to him, having bested his demonic kin, though the demon host was far worse for wear, displaying burns and deep wounds. Eisenhorn was surprised, given the earlier claims by Pontius that his own demon host's powers far surpassed Cherubael's. Cherubael must be powerful indeed, but now any easy way to understand this was gone. The Malus Codicium and all its knowledge lay in ashes around him. The last we see of Eisenhorn and his various cohorts before the Bequin trilogy is thus. Ravenor was responsible for officially finishing up formal investigations into the planet coded 5213X, otherwise known as Ghoul. The entire planet of Ghoul would be utterly annihilated by Battlefleet Scaris. I do have a short on the process of Exterminatus if you head over to the main channel. I'll link it below. Nail and Kara Swole would continue in service to Ravenor. These are stories for another day. Medea would return to her homeworld of Glavia to become director of the family's shipwright business. She would disappear during a transplanetary flight, though undisclosed reports suggest she may have survived. Cherubael was never recorded within Imperial archives. This leads us to ascertain that perhaps Eisenhorn's allies and friends were loyal more than even he believed, as this suggests nobody besides Godwin Fischig reported Eisenhorn's use or binding of the demon. Eisenhorn, a shadowy figure as usual, is believed to have continued in service to the Inquisition, though there are no formal reports or recordings of his life past the debacle on Ghoul. I would be very interested to know whether the recent experience of losing friends and witnessing what happens to a human who dabbles in the dark arts was enough to influence Eisenhorn back to his more Puritan roots, but somehow I don't think that would be the case. I hope you've enjoyed yourself, especially if you've got this far. As always, take it easy. Have a good one.